On this chapter of Bruder on Benefits, let's talk about eligibility for group health plans. Strangely enough, this question comes up fairly regularly. I get a lot of phone calls from plan sponsors, HR folks saying, do I have to include this particular employee in my group health insurance? Or more importantly, I've got a class of employees that I want to exclude from my group health insurance. Can I do that? Well, the answer is it depends. I know that's a lawyer's answer, but it depends on two things. First, in determining whether in fact you have to offer health insurance to an individual, you need to look at your plan document. Now, your plan document probably has what's called an adoption agreement. And in the adoption agreement, there'll be a chapter called Eligibility. It'll list all the employees who are eligible to participate in the plan. Now, when you look at that eligibility, it's inclusive, typically not exclusive. What do I mean by that? I mean that if an individual falls into a category of employee that's supposed to be covered under the plan, chances are you have to offer them coverage. Now, there may be hour requirements associated with that. For example, your plan may say you have to work at least 30 hours on average to be eligible for coverage. But in looking at the eligibility provisions, you want to be over-inclusive, at least initially, rather than exclusive. Typically, under an adoption agreement, the adoption agreement will also list those employees who are not eligible for coverage. Things like temporary employees, leased employees, employees who have, for example, union benefits that provide them with group health insurance. But your starting point needs to be your plan document. The other thing you need to keep in mind is something that I just mentioned, and that is, what is the employee doing? Is the employee satisfying the hours requirements? Are they working enough to be covered by the plan? Have they recently changed from full-time to part-time? That trips up folks all the time. If someone goes from a full-time employee to a part-time employee, they may no longer be eligible for coverage under the group health plan. So does that mean you can drop them from coverage? Well, wait. Because there's this little thing called COBRA that we need to deal with when we're talking about eligibility for group health plans as well. COBRA, which you're probably familiar with, generally means that the individual has a right, after they've lost eligibility for coverage, to continue coverage, notwithstanding the fact that they're no longer eligible. Coverage is typically what they had prior to losing their eligibility, and you may be able to pass the entire cost over onto the employee if in fact they're subject to COBRA coverage. Now, under federal rules, typically you have to have 20 or more employees on average to be subject to COBRA coverage, but many states have mini COBRA coverage requirements as well. So if you're in a particular jurisdiction that has mini COBRA, you want to take a look at those rules as well. The takeaway as far as this chapter is concerned, if you think you have an employee that's eligible for coverage, assume that they are, go to your plan document, make sure that they're eligible to be covered under the plan, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, because the downside to excluding an employee from coverage is not only that you may have to provide coverage to that employee in the future, but there could also be penalties and interest associated with the failure to provide coverage. I'm Charles Bruder. This has been a chapter of Bruder on Benefits. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Hey, it's Charles Bruder. You've probably seen me on Bruder on Benefits. Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you're seeing, do me a favor. Click the thumbs up button down below. In addition, click the bell and be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel. And if you have some questions or some thoughts, some things you'd like me to cover, leave me a comment below. I'll read all the comments and I'll be happy to include you in a future episode. Thanks again for tuning in. I appreciate your support.